I never thought grief could sound like footsteps hers, echoing down my father's hallway, claiming everything he left behind. That sound still haunts me. The clack of heels on our old wooden floor. The echo of boxes being dragged. Doors opening and closing. The quiet that used to belong to my father and me, suddenly filled with someone else's life. My stepsister, Leela, had moved in, and with her came her husband, her 2 loud kids, and a sense of entitlement I couldn't have imagined even in my worst dreams. It all began the week after the funeral. I was still wearing black, still folding my father's shirts with trembling hands, still finding his smell on his sweaters. That mix of cedar wood and motor oil, the scent of every Sunday he'd spent in the garage fixing old radios, fixing the world for everyone but himself. I thought I'd have time to breathe, to grieve. But grief has a way of being interrupted sometimes, by the very people who should share it with you. When Leela arrived, she didn't come with condolences. She came with movers. Dad would have wanted us to be together, she said, setting her coffee cup right on his old mahogany table, no coaster. I looked at her, trying to find the girl I once knew. The one who used to braid my hair when I was 8, back when we were still trying to pretend our parents' remarriage had made us a real family. But she wasn't that girl anymore. She was colder now, polished, sharp-edged, the kind of woman who looked at a home and saw property lines, not memories. For context, my father had married Lila's mother when I was 12. We were never close. Lila was in college already, and she treated me like some noisy reminder of her mother's second marriage. She moved out soon after, and we barely spoke for years. I never held it against her. Families blend the way oil meets water awkwardly, with time and distance. But after Dad passed, things changed. She called me once, her tone almost soft. "I just want to make sure you're okay," she'd said. I believed her. I thought maybe loss had brought us closer. That was my first mistake, because a week later, she was standing in the driveway, smiling tightly as her husband gave orders to movers. "We'll just stay a few months," she said, "until we figure out the estate stuff." The estate stuff. Those 2 words became the storm cloud over my life. Before Dad died, he had told me plain and simple that the house would be mine. He even showed me the draft of his will. "This is your home, Grace," he'd said. "You grew up here. No one's taking that from you." But the will hadn't been finalized. He'd passed away just days before his lawyer appointment, and Lila knew it. The first few days of her stay, I tried to be polite. I cooked dinner, set an extra plate. I told her kids stories about Grandpa's garden, how he used to grow tomatoes the size of softballs. But little by little, my space started shrinking. First, my things in the kitchen disappeared. My mug, my spices, the photo of Dad and me by the window. Then came the living room. She replaced Dad's old recliner with a gray couch from her condo. "Modernizes the space," she'd said. Then one evening, I came home from work and found my bedroom door locked. I thought it was a mistake. I knocked. Lila's voice came from inside. "Oh, hey, we moved the kids in here. They needed the space." My mouth went dry. "Lila, this is my room." "I know," she said cheerfully, as if she were discussing a weather report. "But you've got the guest room now. It's better for everyone." The guest room was my father's office, dusty, cramped, and still smelling faintly of ink and pipe tobacco. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan that wobbled with every turn. My father's house, my home, didn't feel like mine anymore. I wanted to confront her, to scream, to demand what was rightfully mine. But grief is a strange silencer. You tell yourself to be patient, to not cause trouble. You tell yourself family means compromise. That's what I did, until the day I found the envelope. It was buried under a stack of unpaid bills and catalogs on the kitchen counter. My father's handwriting, the kind that slanted just a little to the right. The envelope read, "For Grace." My breath caught. I opened it, and inside was a folded letter, yellowed and slightly smudged. "If you're reading this, I didn't make it to the lawyer. But you know what's yours, Grace. Keep the house. Don't let anyone make you feel small in your own home." The words blurred as tears welled up. I could almost hear his voice. I held that letter like a lifeline, like proof that I wasn't crazy for feeling wronged. But when I showed it to Lila, she laughed. "Grace, that's not legal. It's sweet, but it's not binding. The property's technically shared." "Shared?" I repeated. "You didn't even live here for 20 years. Her eyes hardened. "Maybe not, but I'm his daughter too. You think you're the only one who deserves something?" That's when I realized this wasn't about grief or family. It was about control. And I was done being silent. That night, I sat in the dark office surrounded by Dad's papers, his old tools, his unfinished projects. I could feel his presence, urging me to stand up to fight. But fight how? I had no money for lawyers, no will, no clear claim except a letter that meant everything emotionally but nothing legally. Still, something in me refused to give up, because this wasn't just about a house. It was about respect, about the promise my father made me, about not letting the last piece of him be swallowed by someone else's greed. So I made a plan, a quiet one, and it started with finding out exactly what Leela was hiding behind that polite smile. It started with the mail. Every morning, I'd hear the metallic clang of the mailbox lid. Before Dad passed, that sound had been comforting, a small reminder of routine. But now, it made me tense, because every letter that came in, Lila would snatch it first. Bills, she'd say briskly, tossing envelopes into a pile. Nothing important, except I noticed she never tossed them in the open. She'd slip some into her purse instead. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. Maybe she was just trying to stay organized. But one afternoon, while she was out picking up her kids from school, curiosity got the better of me. The pile of unopened mail sat on the counter, thick and messy. My name was on at least 4 of them. The top one was from the county clerk's office. When I tore it open, my heart began to pound. It was a notice of property assessment addressed to both my father and Lila Richardson. Not me. Not Grace Williams. Her. And the date dated after my father's death. That didn't make sense. The property title had never been changed. I knew that. Dad hadn't even updated it since Mom passed years ago. How could her name be on an official document now? My palms went clammy. I read the fine print again and again until the words started swimming. Had she already transferred the property into her name? I felt a wave of nausea rise up. That night, I waited until everyone went to bed, her husband snoring down the hall, the kids' tablets still glowing faintly from under their blankets, and tiptoed into the living room. The sound of the old floorboards creaking beneath me was almost deafening. On the desk sat her laptop, the same one she guarded like a hawk. I hesitated. I wasn't raised to snoop. But then again, I wasn't raised to be locked out of my own bedroom either. I sat down, lifted the screen, and waited. No password. Typical Lila. Careless, confident. I clicked through her documents, my pulse racing with each folder. Then, there it was. Property, transfer, form, PDF. My fingers trembled as I opened it. The form listed my father's house, our address, and beside new owner, it said Lila Richardson. The signature line was filled in with a shaky scrawl that looked nothing like my father's. But someone had tried to make it look like his. The date on it? 2 days before his death. My stomach dropped. 2 days before he died. My father had been in the hospital, sedated, weak, barely able to hold a pen. I'd been there. I'd fed him soup. I'd watched him fall asleep mid-sentence. There was no way he'd signed anything. I leaned back, the laptop screen casting a blue light on my face. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the mouse. Had she forged his signature? The thought alone made me dizzy. Just then, I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate. Lila's husband. I shut the laptop and backed away, heart hammering in my chest. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every creak, every whisper of wind outside sounded like a threat. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I needed proof. Something concrete. The next day, I went to the county records office downtown. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a faint southern drawl, typed my address into her computer. After a few moments, she frowned. Says here there was a title transfer filed 3 weeks ago to a Miss Lila Richardson. Filed how? I asked, my throat tight. Electronically, with notarized documents attached. I swallowed hard. Can I see them? She nodded, printed a few pages, and handed them to me. The first page was the transfer form I'd seen on Lila's laptop, the fake signature, the same date. But on the second page, there was something new, a scanned image of a notary seal, and under it, the notary's name, Rebecca Kane. Do you happen to know where this notary's office is? I asked. The clerk pointed to an address scribbled at the bottom, just off Maple Street. I thanked her and walked out into the afternoon sun, the papers fluttering in my hand. My heart was pounding so loud, it drowned out the city noise. I drove straight there, a small office tucked between a florist and a laundromat. A brass bell jingled as I stepped inside. A woman looked up from her desk, startled. Can I help you? Are you Rebecca Kane? Yes, ma'am. I hesitated, then laid the papers in front of her. You notarized the signature. She leaned forward, squinting. That's my stamp, yeah. Do you remember the man who signed this? Henry Williams? She blinked, thinking, oh, him. The older gentleman? No, I didn't meet him in person. His daughter came in, said he was too sick to come down, but she had the signed paperwork. She just needed it notarized. My breath caught. His daughter? Yeah, Lila... something. Richardson? Maybe? I felt the world tilt around me. So you never saw him sign it? I asked quietly. No, ma'am. She assured me it was legitimate. She seemed nice enough. I closed my eyes for a moment. Thank you. That's all I needed. I walked out, my legs trembling. The sky had gone gray. A storm was rolling in, or maybe it was just me. Realizing that everything I'd been afraid to believe was true. Lila had forged my father's signature. She'd stolen my inheritance, our home before the ground had even settled on his grave. That night, I sat alone in the dark kitchen, staring at the letter Dad had left me. His handwriting, so honest, so full of love, and Lila's a lie pressed into paper, pretending to be him. It made my stomach turn. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted justice. But to get that, I need help, and I knew exactly who to call. My father's old lawyer, Mr. Dorsey, the man Dad trusted most. Mr. Dorsey's office hadn't changed in years. Same dusty blinds. Same mahogany shelves filled with law books that looked older than I was. The faint smell of coffee and printer ink clung to the air. I remembered sitting in that very office when Dad first talked about revising his will. He'd smiled at me and said, "It's time to make things official, sweetheart." And now here I was, holding proof that someone had stolen that future. When I told Mr. Dorsey what I'd found, the forged documents, the notary's statement, he leaned back in his chair, exhaled deeply, and rubbed his temples. "Grace," he said softly, "I'm sorry. I knew your father wanted this house to be yours. He told me himself. But without a signed will, this complicates things." "I know," I whispered. "But if she forged his signature," he nodded slowly, "then it's a felony. But proving it, that's not easy." He took the papers from me and scanned them carefully, his expression darkening as he compared the signature on the transfer form with an old copy of my father's handwriting he kept in his files. After a long silence, he said, "You're right. This isn't your father's hand. It's close, but the pressure's wrong. The loops are inconsistent. I can get a handwriting expert to confirm." Something inside me shifted. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. "Do it," I said firmly. "I want the truth out." He nodded, his voice quiet but resolute. "Then we'll fight this." I left his office with a trembling sense of purpose. The late afternoon sun bathed Main Street in gold, and for a moment, I felt Dad's presence beside me, proud, protective. But the feeling didn't last long. When I got home, Lila was waiting at the kitchen table. Her face was calm, almost too calm, like a storm cloud pretending to be blue sky. "You went to see Dad's lawyer, didn't you?" she said, her voice steady but sharp. I froze. "How did you—" She smirked. "Small town, Grace. People talk. Mr. Dorsey's assistant happens to be married to my cousin." I clenched my fists. "So what? I have every right to talk to him. You've been hiding things from me." "Hiding?" she repeated with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm managing things. Someone has to. You've been too busy moping around this house, pretending it's still yours." Her words hit like slaps. "Pretending?" I whispered. "Lila, this was my father's house." "Our father," she corrected coldly. "And he wanted it to stay in the family." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something. Lila didn't see me as family. She saw me as an obstacle, a reminder that her mother's second marriage had given someone else part of what she thought was hers. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "I know what you did." Her expression flickered. Just for a second, I saw fear. Then she smiled. "You don't know anything you can prove." That was the moment I realized how far she'd go to protect her lie. "Lila," I said quietly, "you forged his signature. You know he was in no condition to sign anything." She didn't deny it. Not outright. She just shrugged and said, "He told me to take care of the house. I did what he couldn't." "That's not taking care," I said, my voice shaking. "That's stealing." Her eyes hardened. "Stealing? You lived off him your whole life, Grace. You never moved out, never built anything for yourself. Maybe he realized I was the one who could actually handle things." That one stung because part of it was true. After Mom died, I'd stayed with Dad longer than most daughters did. He was all I had, and I was all he had. But love isn't dependency, it's loyalty. And she was twisting that loyalty into weakness. You know what the difference is between us, Lila? I said softly. You see this house as a prize. I see it as my home. She tilted her head, smiling thinly. Well, homes can be replaced. Then she stood, gathered her things, and walked past me. But before she left the room, she said over her shoulder, if you're smart, you'll stop digging. Lawyers cost money, and you don't have any. The door slammed behind her, and I just stood there, trembling. That night, Mr. Dorsey called. His voice sounded cautious, but hopeful. The handwriting expert confirmed it, he said. The signature's a forgery, and the notary's testimony will help. We can challenge the title transfer in court. I sank onto the couch, relief washing over me. Thank you, I whispered. There's something else, he continued. Your father had another document, a letter of intent he drafted right before he passed. It's not a will, but it's strong evidence of his wishes. I found it in my archives. My heart leapt. What does it say? He read it aloud, his voice gentle. I, Henry Williams, intend for my daughter Grace to inherit the family home and its contents upon my passing. It is her right, and my wish that she continues to live here, as she always has. Tears filled my eyes. That was Dad, direct, loving, unpretentious. With that document, and the proof of forgery, we finally had a case. But word travels fast in small towns. Within a week, everyone knew, or thought they knew, what was happening. Whispers followed me at the grocery store, in church, even at work. People asked questions that stung, half believing Lila's version of events. She said you're trying to take everything, one neighbor told me. But I told her, Henry would have wanted Grace to have that house. I thanked her, but the damage was done. Lila had been talking, spinning the story, painting me as the greedy one. Still, I kept my head high, because for once, I wasn't the quiet one in the background. I was standing up for myself, and when the court date was set, I could almost feel Dad's hand on my shoulder, the kind of silent encouragement only a parent could give. I wasn't fighting just for a house, I was fighting for his truth. And I was ready. The day of the hearing came faster than I expected. It was early spring, the kind of day when the air feels soft and restless, caught between warmth and chill. I wore the navy blue dress Dad had bought me for my first job interview. The one he said made me look steady and strong. I needed that energy now more than ever. When I arrived at the courthouse, Lila was already there. She looked sharp, pressed blazer, hair perfectly curled, confidence painted on like armor. But her eyes, they darted when she saw me, just for a second. Her lawyer, a smooth-talking man named Aaron Holt, stood beside her with that smirk lawyers get when they think they've already won. Grace Williams. He greeted me like he was saying a joke. Quite the family affair, isn't it? I ignored him and walked straight past. Inside, Mr. Dorsey gave me a reassuring nod. Just tell the truth, he whispered. That's all we need. The judge, an older woman named Judge Barrett, listened carefully as both sides presented their stories. Aaron went first. His tone was syrupy, smooth. Your Honor, my client, Miss Lila Carson, merely fulfilled her father's wishes. Mr. Henry Williams intended for both daughters to share the home, and when that became impossible, he agreed she should take over its ownership to maintain it. Then it was Mr. Dorsey's turn. He rose slowly, his voice calm but firm. Your Honor, that's not true. The evidence shows the transfer was forged after Mr. Williams' passing. We have a handwriting expert's report confirming that. We also have testimony from the notary, who denies ever authenticating this signature. And finally, we have a letter written by Mr. Williams himself, clearly expressing his intent for Grace to inherit the home. You could hear a pin drop. Aaron's smirk faltered for the first time. Lila crossed her arms tightly, jaw set. Judge Barrett took her glasses off and leaned forward. A forgery is a serious allegation, Mr. Dorsey. You're confident in this evidence? Yes, Your Honor, he said. The judge nodded. Then I'll allow the expert's report and the notary's testimony into the record. We'll proceed. As the hearing went on, I sat there listening to every word, my palms damp, heart thudding so loudly I could barely hear myself think. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, gripping the edge of the podium. My father wasn't a complicated man, I began. He loved his home, he loved this town, and he loved his family, even when it didn't always love him back. He trusted people easily, maybe too easily. When he got sick, he couldn't sign anything without help. So, when I saw that someone had moved the house out of his name, I knew something was wrong. My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. This isn't about money. It's about my father's wishes, his memory. I'm just trying to protect that. When I sat down, I caught Lila watching me, and for the first time, her face wasn't proud or smug. It was unreadable, almost frightened. The next day, before the verdict, I went back to the house. It had been weeks since I'd dared to step inside. Everything looked exactly the same and completely different. The curtains were still drawn halfway, the way Dad liked them. The old clock in the hallway still ticked steadily, its pendulum swinging like a heartbeat. But the air was heavy now, filled with echoes of anger and grief. I walked into Dad's study and touched the edge of his old writing desk. My eyes landed on a photograph, the three of us, at a summer picnic years ago. Lila was smiling wide, her hair flying in the wind, her hand in mine. I remember that day. Dad had grilled burgers, and we'd argued over who got the biggest one. Lila had shoved me playfully into the grass, and Dad had laughed until he cried. Looking at that photo now, I didn't see enemies. I saw two sisters who'd once loved each other, and for a brief, painful moment, I wished things could go back to that. But some wounds go too deep. The next morning, Judge Barrett read her decision. Her voice was calm, steady, professional, but every word felt like thunder. Based on the expert testimony and documentary evidence, she said, "This court finds that the property transfer executed under Henry Williams' name was fraudulent. The house is to be restored to the rightful ownership of Grace Williams, as expressed in Mr. Williams' documented intent." I couldn't breathe. I turned to Mr. Dorsey, who gave a slow, relieved smile. "You did it, Grace." But I barely heard him, because across the room, Lila stood frozen, pale, silent. For once, she had nothing to say. Her lawyer leaned in to whisper something, but she just shook her head. Then she turned and walked out without looking back. That evening, I drove back to the house. The sun was setting, painting the windows in soft gold. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, half expecting to feel joy, triumph, relief, something. But instead I felt empty. Winning didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't bring Dad back. It didn't fix what was broken between Lila and me. I stood in the living room, listening to the faint creaks of the house settling the same comforting sounds I'd grown up with, and whispered, "It's over, Dad. We did it." The words caught in my throat, because deep down, I knew it wasn't really over. A week later, I found a letter in the mailbox. No return address, just my name, written in familiar, looping handwriting. It was from Lila. "Grace, I won't fight you anymore. You won. Maybe you even deserve to. I didn't forge Dad's signature because I hated you. I did it because I thought he'd never really see me otherwise. You were his everything. I was just the extra. You got the house now. Take care of it. Take care of yourself. Don't come looking for me. Lila." I sat on the porch for a long time, holding that letter, feeling the ache of what we'd lost. Dad's voice echoed in my head. Again, family isn't about who's right. It's about who stays. And even though Lila had left, part of me still hoped one day she'd come home. Because no court ruling could undo the truth that we were blood. And blood, for better or worse, never really lets go. The weeks after the verdict felt strangely quiet. For so long, my life had revolved around that fight. Lawyers, evidence, courtrooms, sleepless nights. Now that it was over, there was just silence. The kind of silence that makes you realize how much noise pain had been making in your head. I started waking up early again, making coffee the way Dad liked it, strong and black, 2 sugars. I'd sit by the kitchen window, watching the morning light spill over the yard, and try to feel normal. Some days I'd walk through the house, room by room, like I was reacquainting myself with an old friend. I'd run my fingers over the wooden banister, open the drawers, smell the faint trace of his cologne still lingering in the hallway closet. It wasn't about reclaiming property anymore. It was about reclaiming peace. But even as I settled back in, there was a shadow that followed me, the absence of my sister. One evening, I found myself standing in front of the room that used to be mine, and then hers, the same door she'd once locked me out of. For weeks I couldn't bring myself to open it. But that night, I turned the knob and stepped inside. The air was still heavy with her perfume, floral and sharp, like lilacs after rain. Boxes were stacked neatly by the wall, labeled in her handwriting. I recognized one immediately. Dad's things. Inside were old photographs, birthday cards, his worn-out baseball cap, and a letter sealed in a plain white envelope. My heart skipped when I saw my name on it. Grace. For a moment, I thought maybe Lila had written again. But the handwriting wasn't hers. It was Dad's. The letter was dated a week before he passed. My Gracie, if you're reading this, I probably didn't get to tell you everything I wanted. You've always been my steady one, the one who holds everyone else together. I know Lila's been distant. She carries her mother's loneliness. I couldn't fix that for her, though I tried. Maybe one day, the two of you will find your way back to each other. I want you to remember something. A home is more than walls and papers. It's built from forgiveness. Don't let bitterness live here after I'm gone. Dad, by the time I finished reading, tears had blurred the ink. I sat there on the floor, holding that letter to my chest, and for the first time since the funeral, I let myself cry, really cry. Not from anger, not from loss, but from the deep ache of love that still hadn't faded. After that, I made a decision. The next morning, I called a contractor and had the locks replaced, not because I wanted to shut anyone out, but because I wanted to start fresh. I repainted the walls in soft cream, opened all the windows, let sunlight flood every corner. And then I did something that surprised even me. I turned the guest room into a small art studio. Dad had always said I had a good eye, though I'd never believed him. I started painting again little things at first. The maple tree in the yard, the old clock in the hallway, the sunlight on the porch steps. It became my therapy, my prayer, my way of turning pain into color. Sometimes, I'd find myself talking to Dad out loud as I painted. I'd tell him about the neighbors, the court ruling, even about Lila's letter. And sometimes, I'd imagine him sitting in his old armchair, smiling, that tired, knowing smile. You did good, kid, I could almost hear him say. You found your way home. A few months passed. Life began to take on rhythm again. Gentle, simple. I started volunteering at the local library, joined a book club, and even made friends with Mrs. Langley next door, who baked pies like it was an Olympic sport. But no matter how peaceful things became, a part of me still looked out the window sometimes, half expecting a car to pull up, hoping it would be Lila. Then one day, it happened. It was late afternoon when I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, there she was, standing on the porch, a suitcase at her feet. She looked smaller somehow, tired. The confidence that once wrapped around her like armor was gone. Hey, she said softly. I didn't speak at first. We just stood there, years of hurt and silence hanging between us. Then, I stepped aside. Come in. She walked through the doorway slowly, her eyes scanning the familiar walls. You changed things, she said, half smiling. I had to, I replied. The house needed air. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Dad used to tell us stories, and for a while, we just breathed. Then she said, I'm sorry, Grace. For all of it. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know. Her voice cracked on that last word. I could have said 1,000 things reminded her of the eviction, the forged papers, the humiliation. But instead, I said, Dad wouldn't want us to carry this forever. Tears welled up in her eyes. She nodded, staring down at her hands. We didn't hug, not right away. But there was peace in that silence, a small bridge rebuilt, plank by plank. Lila didn't stay long. She moved to a nearby town, started working again. And we kept in touch. Not daily, but enough. Sometimes she'd visit, bringing flowers for Dad's grave. Sometimes I'd call her just to check in. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was real. And maybe that's all any family can hope for. Not perfection, but peace. One evening, months later, I sat on the porch watching the sunset. The lights spilled across the yard in golden waves, the same way it used to when Dad would sit beside me. I looked up at the sky and whispered, You were right, Dad. A home really is built from forgiveness. The wind stirred the trees gently, as if answering back. And for the first time in a long while, I felt light again. Free. When I look back now, I don't see a story about a house. I see a story about two sisters both carrying wounds no one could see, a father who tried his best to hold them together, and a home that became both battlefield and sanctuary. It took me a long time to understand that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what someone did to you. It's about freeing yourself from what they left behind in your heart. When Lila locked me out of my own room, I thought I'd lost everything. My family, my dignity, my place in the world. But sometimes, when life takes something from you, it's not to punish you. It's to clear space for strength you didn't know you had. Rebuilding that house wasn't just about fresh paint or new locks. It was about learning how to breathe again without bitterness. And maybe that's what healing really looks like. Not grand gestures or dramatic apologies, but quiet mornings, small kindnesses, and the courage to stay soft in a world that tries to harden you. Dad used to say, home isn't just where you live. It's what you keep alive inside you. And now I understand what he meant. Because even though I lost time, trust, and pieces of the past, I gained something else. A piece that no one can take away. Leela and I will probably never be the sisters we once were. But we're no longer enemies either. We're just two women trying to make peace with the same story, and maybe that's enough. So if you're listening to this, and you've ever been shut out by someone you love, if you've ever felt like the walls you built to protect yourself turned into the same walls that kept love out, I want you to know something. You can still open the door again. Not for them, but for yourself. Because home isn't made of bricks and inheritance papers. It's made of forgiveness, faith, and the courage to stay kind when you have every reason not to be. Would you have let your stepsister back in after everything she did? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one.